All right, we're live. Terra Jackson, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
How are you?
I'm doing good. Like I said, I just woke up from my midday nap, so I'm
Very
feeling
nice.
feeling really good.
Lovely. So, the 10 kilometer PB at the weekend, was it?
Yeah, so I hadn't ran a 10K in probably several years, but I used to run the 5K, 10K in college. So it's a post-college, or it's like a lifetime PR. So it's faster than I ran in college. So it's really
Nice.
fun.
How quick was that?
Uh, 38:27.
Nice, nice.
So
Congrats. So
I beat all
you're
the,
sorry, say that again.
I said I beat all the men. So it's always a good day when you can beat all the boys.
Well done. Good, good. All right. So what is your sporting history? So you were a runner when you were younger?
Yeah, so I've been running since I was in seventh grade. So like 12, 11, 12. I'm coming up on 2 decades of running. So that's my background. So I competed in USA and AAU track when I was really young, and then competed in college as I got older, and then found Spartan racing and now hybrid. So it's kind of like have hopped on what's been, I don't know, I don't know if it's trendy, but it's like I've always been looking for a sport where you can incorporate like strength and speed, and now hybrid. First that was kind of Spartan, but obviously not as much strength stuff as the new hybrid sports that are coming out now.
So you think something like HYROX and Deka, I guess, are more suited to you, would you say?
Yes, I've actually been really surprised though this year. Well, as I've gotten more into HYROX, I never thought that I would be like the weaker athlete. Like strength has been always like my my thing, and then I was a good runner, but the people who win Spartan races are elite level runners, so they're very good trail runners. So I was like, oh well, I'm really strong, but then they'll like kick my butt and all the running stuff. So I was like, oh yeah, well HYROX is here, all the strength stuff. I'm gonna like be really really great, and then I'm getting my butt kicked in the stations. so so it's interesting to see like the different range of athletes from like CrossFit to still some running background. Actually, less like it is perplexing that the race is more than half running, and like a lot of the people don't really even run that much. So, there are people with all different kinds of skill sets that are able to do well in the sport. So there doesn't seem to be like one specific way to train yet. I'm sure as the sport progresses, like we'll kind of figure out like, oh, this is like the direction to go. Just like any sport, when it's new, people are going to do a bunch of different things and kind of see what sticks. But then the stuff that really sticks, everybody's going to start doing it. So,
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of it's part of what I enjoy at the moment, like the excitement about it, like working out what's best, the best way to train, and eventually, if there is a set way to train, it might just get a little boring. There's the guessing about the best way to do it is part of the excitement for me.
see, I like that's why I like hybrid. It's always the same, always the same. So with running, like there's a very like specific way you would train. I mean, obviously you have little variances, but nobody runs a 10K or half marathon and doesn't do threshold work.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like bread and butter of like your training. That's really what makes you a good like it'd be considered long distance, but that's the bread and butter of your training. So it's so weird for me coming into a sport that in my mind I want to see it as like a threshold activity. So it's like you got to do so much threshold work, but then a lot of the athletes don't do any threshold work at all, and I'm just like, how are you so good at threshold stuff and you don't do any? So it's definitely like a learning experience. So it's like putting together the pieces of the puzzle, and what works for some people, might not work for everyone else. Obviously, you have people that train for 10 hours a week, and then you have like the crazy people that are training like 25 hours a week, like Dylan. So, or even Meg Jacoby, like there are, I don't know that like necessarily, everybody can't train like that. It's just physiologically, I would die personally. I need a nap to hit my 12 hours a week. So everybody's gonna like respond to training differently. So I guess there is that variance in across all sports, but I feel like it's even more of a balance with hybrid because you have to be so strong and so aerobically conditioned.
Is that what you're doing around 12 hours a week at the moment?
Yeah, I push up against 12 and my body is like, we don't like this so much. So I'm in a strength, more of a strength block now. So a lot of my cardio and intensity is cut out. So I'm able to do a little bit more, but I'd say when I'm in season, like 9 to 10 hours is probably more where I can sit just because of the increase of intensity from the training. Just makes me real like I every time I push up against like the overtraining wall, I guess you would call it, I start like I can't sleep and your body's just tired all the time. So that you're starting to get some diminishing returns because you can only perform as well as your body's able to recover. So if you're not able to recover, then the training is useless essentially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think it's good for a lot of people that like me might be watching this to see as well, though, that you're not doing 20 hours a week. I know someone wrote to me the other day and he was like, how am I supposed to compete? I've got kids and got work to do and everything like that. And like in the expectation that he had to do like 20 hours a week to be able to compete. But like you're proof that you don't necessarily have to do that.
Yeah,
And I
I
know,
don't think the majority of athletes are doing 20 hours a week. I think we have like some outliers, like I said, that are able to handle that kind of volume and intensity and recover. But majority of athletes are not going to be able to sustain that level of volume and intensity, especially year round. Like with hybrid sports, there's no real. I feel like HYROX kind of try to do like seasons and like no races in the summer, but now it's a business, so they're now like slowly putting races in June, July. So it'll be you have the opportunity to race year round, so you really need to be able to kind of pull back for your off
mm,
season. If your body needs that time to mentally and physically recover and you're not giving it to it. So, I mean, I've been overtrained more times than I would like to mention. So I know what my body kind of like can handle. And when I was finishing up with that big training block after Chicago from basically November to, well, I guess, starting in probably September and extending it all the way out to Chicago, I was tired mentally, physically, like, so it was time to like go back into the off season, regroup, find like a good like recovery training balance so that my body can get really mentally ready to do another high rocks. It's not fun. Like Deka is like, oh, like you go and you like Deka's like running a 5K. Yeah, like it hurts, but it hurts in the moment. And for like maybe like 8 minutes. HYROX hurts me for like 50 minutes of the 60 minutes that I'm competing. And I almost dread like after I finish it, I'm like, I don't want to do this again for like after Maastricht, I was like, oh my God, I gotta do this again in 3 weeks. And it sounds like I didn't want to do it. So mentally a lot harder, at least for me, because it I'm probably sore for like 3 or 4 days and I don't want to like do too much when I'm like overly sore. So the recovery process is just so much longer and maybe I'm just getting old, but it just a lot. So for me, I would think comparing like if I was still running, HYROX is almost the equivalent of like running a marathon. And I wouldn't run more than 2 marathons a year if I was marathon training. So the thought of more like 4 HYROXs a year is a lot, or it seems like a lot to me. So I don't know. We'll see after Manchester. But you have to qualify in a race, which is like annoying. So you have to at least run 4 races. So if you want to run the championship races, you have to qualify, and then you would have to run 2 more races, and then obviously you would run worlds. So I don't know that that kind of structure is like elite athlete in mind, but everybody else is recovering just fine and they seem okay. So maybe I'm just a complainer.
I'm a lot older than you, but I agree. Like look at the race results every week and everything. The same athletes like seem to be racing it again and again, week after week, and I'm just like, how are you doing that? Like their recovery must be on a different level to mine, to be fair.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you can race like in Europe, it's easier because you don't have to travel as much. Like I've been racing like the last couple weekends, but as training, like training races, so I'm not like flying and like investing all this time getting myself away from training, and I don't expect like a certain result. Like I'm just like, I know that I'm in the middle of the training. This will be a hard effort, and like it is what it is. So I think like if you can use racing as an effective tool for your training, but when you're spending all that time like also traveling, then it's just a lot on your body. But I mean, if you can get to like six hybrid or HYROX races a year via train, I mean, maybe you run a few as an elite racer. I would probably run a few open races, work on transitions and speed, and then like races that matter, run the elite. But you just don't have that kind of opportunity here in the US because there's just so few races.
Yeah. On this subject, do you feel like with the way that there's qualifying spots for the elite races at the World Championships at the regionals, so people have claimed their spots, in Chicago and Maastricht. That feels to me like, I mean, they've earned it, but it's a huge advantage, right? To know that they're racing in Manchester, they've got their spot, and there's everyone else out there like hustling for a spot now. Got to go and do some races. How
I
do
mean,
you feel about that?
especially well for me in the women's field, like the top three women. I mean, maybe I referred to you them. They're the Fab Five for me. So or the Fab Three, not five. But like they're so kind of far ahead of everybody else that there's like no question that they would have qualified based on their times. So the gap is so big that even if there wasn't direct qualification, they know that they're going. So for the men, it's a little tricky because there's so much like back and forth. I mean, I feel like, well, I always think this that when we go into these championship races, like I was excited to watch the men's race, but then we're like too close, so we don't get to watch. But I was like, there could be like 10 men in the wall balls in this race, and it could be like, a drag out. But it never is. There's always like a pretty decent sized gap. And I'm like waiting for this race where you just have like, you know, 8 to 10 guys. Cause I mean, if you look between Maastricht and Chicago, there was a lot of lead changes. People flipped
Mm-hmm.
around. Then 2 weeks later, you have Kent run a 56. So, like, so there could be a lot of like variance between how the men place, but the women, the top three is they're pretty like solidified. I mean, you have a couple other people like Alondra who are like kind of right there, and she's very consistent. But then everybody else, I feel like not that they're not as consistent as her, and like they just are not quite up to like the top three level right now. So, I mean, if I would bet on anybody to bust up to the top three, it'd probably be Alondra. But um, we're all the rest of us are kind of like close and fighting for the remaining podium spots in my mind. But you never know. Anybody can have a bad race, especially the way that Lauren races. Like she could pull somebody out, she could pull one of them out, and they just can't hang that day. Like you go out in a race like that, you can't have a bad race. So if you're having a bad day and Lauren pulls you out at 5:20 pace, you're going to be having a really bad day if you're feeling good. So it's pretty amazing. Like I actually have a running coach, and I was talking to him about how hybrid is so weird because before Deka World Championships, I was like, you would never go out a 10K like a minute faster per mile than you anticipate averaging your pace. And hybrid, they do that every single time. It's like very contradictory to how you would run a running race. And I don't know if it's I can't get that out of my mind, but I'm always like a slow start, fast finish person, which the way that HYROX is set up doesn't really work for me because you have like four girls who can go unbroken on wall balls, and I just am not there. So Deka's setup was kind of better because the last stations were more my strength. So it almost naturally played to the way that I race. But I don't know. So my big thing probably going into Manchester is figuring out a race strategy that can work for me then won't make me blow up. And then also I have enough time when I hit the last two stations to not, because somebody like Miriam, in my mind, she's more in my like racing corral kind of thing.
Mhm.
But if I come into the lunges without at least a minute and a half, I know she's going to catch me because I only have one run left and she has like, she lunges in under 2:30 and she does her wall balls in under 3 minutes. And I can't have less time than that to be able to still stay ahead. So I know that strategically there are places that I need to be in certain parts of the race. And I try not to get like too hung up on that, but some of them are just realistic. Like Miriam is arguably probably the best closer as result is like compared to the rest of her race. Um, but she just doesn't quite have the foot speed of the top three. So she stations better than anybody, but the running component of her race is not quite at the level. I mean, you have Meg, who's a sub 17 collegiate runner, and I don't know Michaela's background for running, but she real fast. And then ran a 10. I was like, Lauren just had to run a 10K the weekend before I ran a 10K because I was all pumped up and I was like, yeah, on my running and stuff. And then she ran like 36:55.
Okay.
Well, damn, Lauren, like you just had to steal my thunder, but it so one of my friends was like, "Oh, well, that's not that far off." I was like, "That's 15 seconds a mile. That's pretty far off." So her running is clearly coming back really strong, and it's really cool to see her progress from even just as early as like November back in Deka. Like she was kind of coming off of having a baby, and she had a good race in LA, and then obviously she crushed it in Maastricht, and she's just getting better. So
Yeah.
and she's the one to watch. I don't see a lot of hiccups coming for her in Manchester.
Okay.
So
She's your pick, is she? She's your pick for Manchester?
she's my pick.
Okay.
But the and since it's in Europe, I think the lighter sleds will benefit her. Not that she's not one of the stronger athletes, but I think well, her and Michaela, like if I had to do a heavy sled, like who benefits most from a heavy sled, it'd probably be Meg. Um, and then who benefits from a lighter sled would be Lauren and Michaela. So I think the race is gonna be slightly more beneficial for them just because their strength is probably not where Meg is. So she hits the sled. Her and Alondra would hit the sled harder. Because if you look, I mean, I was super surprised that Michaela won Chicago. Like I think I left the sled maybe before her. She had a really hard, tough sled push, but man, she just rocked the rest of the race. So it's like she made up a lot of time. Obviously, sled push is only the second station, but sometimes that can put you out. That sled pushes, it sets the tone for the rest of your race. So if you have a bad sled push, it could easily put you into like a mental not great place. But clearly, didn't bother her. She just like, oh man, that was a tough sled push, and then just like
Yeah.
she.
All right. So you're currently fourth of the 12 remaining spots to qualify for the elite race. You feeling confident that what you've done is good enough?
Yeah, looking at the spread between the top 12, I'm pretty confident now. I knew after Chicago, I was a little worried. I was like thinking about doing the Swedish race next weekend,
Mm-hmm.
but I really can't afford to like miss out on the training. Like I said, they're already kind of ahead. So I need like every training day that I can get. So I will go to Miami to race doubles and do some training stuff, but just because it's like super close for me. So I'll get some like time on the sleds and, 10 miles of beach running apparently. Because I'm going to do women's and mixed doubles. So it'll be a
Wow.
big train. Um, and, hang out on the beach and die after I kill my legs for all of Saturday.
We've gone from talking about how you struggle to recover from a HYROX to doing two on the sand in Miami.
Well, it's doubles, so it's mostly going to be. I'm partnering with Dylan, so if history serves it well, I will do like 10% of the stations. Now I'm gonna pull my weight more this time, but we did doubles in New York, and I think I did like one sled push and I don't know, like 50 wall balls, and that was my contribution to our doubles performance. Too from that race, like people were like, oh, you shouldn't be able to do that, you should have to split 50-50. I was like, one, nobody splits 50-50 in a mixed doubles, and two, like what are you going to do, clock me? Like how much? I mean, that was our strategy. I mean, Dylan runs like sub 6 minute pace, and at that point in my training, like 6 minute pace was closer to 5K pace. So you're doing 8 1K repeats at 5K pace. That's not an easy workout. So, for me it was still an effort. Um, but we'll do that, and then I'm doing women's doubles with Rebecca Nather,
Mhm.
Germany. So she's coming over. We're gonna do that for fun. Um, and again, she's only doing one race. So I mean, maybe I'll just do, 15% there, 15% here, and just do it, get my longer one in. We'll see. But my goal is to push some sleds and, have a good time and good training weekend.
Okay, nice. If we go back to those races in Maastricht and Chicago, how do you feel they went for you?
Um, Not great, but so in Maastricht, I was hoping I was like I'm a real mental racer. So like sometimes my head is like not completely like in the race like it should be. So I had like a great lead up, and I was like, oh yeah, I got this. I felt great, had great training block. And I swear I walked into the venue and my legs felt like they were 1,000 pounds. I was like, what is going on? So I didn't, when I started warming up, I was like, oh, this is not going to be good. So I was already kind of getting in my head a little bit with the way that my legs were feeling. And I was disappointed after the race that I wasn't able to kind of like reel it back in. So I think I mentally kind of checked out. So Chicago, I mean, I mentally had a better race, but it wasn't like a race that like came together for me. So it was good. It just wasn't like a great performance. So I'm kind of still waiting for. I don't think I've had that in HYROX yet, where everything just comes together and you have like this magic race where you feel good and like the stations feel fluid. Like I feel like I have that all the time in Deka, and I think that's why I like it more. Is because it just seems like things can come together easier. So I don't know. Maybe that will be Manchester, hopefully, where I can just get everything to like fall into place. But we'll see. I mean, maybe the race is just hard, and it's just always going to be kind of like a grinder of a race. But I'm still hoping that I can have one of those magic days where it just kind of falls into place. Like I did Madrid in November, and I wouldn't say it was magical, but it also wasn't like as suffery for the first like 6 stations, and then the last 2 stations were still pretty bad. But you almost always expect that, so that almost feels like normal that you would be dying at that point in the race. But I'm still waiting for the magic race.
um, but Deka has gone well for you. So
Yeah,
you
I do. Like I'd raced Knoxville like 2 weeks ago, and I felt bad. Like I had a big training week, and my legs were just meh. But and I didn't have anybody to race because I think the next girl finished like 7 minutes after me or something like that.
wow.
So I was myself, and I was like, oh, what do you know? I ran like my third fastest time in a training block with no competition. So it didn't feel great, but at the same time, I was like, oh, I had a great race. This was good. I was right where I thought that I would kind of be with my fitness. And then I was done. I didn't have to suffer really hard. So it was nice.
Right. And I should say, you're the Deka Fit world champ, Deka Strong world champ, and
Yeah.
second in the Deka Mile.
Third.
Third, sorry. Uh,
So, but I held the record in the mile, in the strong and the fit too. So until Meg comes and screws it all up for me, now Meg comes and screws it all up for me. So I'm gonna enjoy it while it lasts. So, but hopefully once I start focusing completely, I think that's my biggest strength is when I'm like focused on something, I'm usually like all in it, which has been hard for HYROX because I feel like I can't get in it. Like I don't even want to. I'm not like when I went for get ready for Deka World Championships. I didn't race. I didn't like do anything. I was very like structured and did everything I was supposed to. But now that I'm like getting ready for Manchester, I'm like, well, there's Deka, and then so I can't. I don't know that I'm like completely sold on racing HYROX yet, because it's just I don't know. I don't know. Maybe if I have the magic race, I'll change my mind. But usually it's like a bunch of suffering. So
Is that going back to like Deka? When was that? Was that November?
yeah, beginning of November.
Okay. Do you feel like and you like solely trained for that? Do you feel like doing so has held you back in any way going as you've gone into HYROX? Like if how much like the training just purely focused on Deka has held you back in HYROX for the rest of the season or not at all?
I mean, I guess like there was a lot of talk about that with people who raced in LA, like to
Mm-hmm.
focus on Deka. Um, well, there's no real strength component in Deka. So like if you're spending all this off-season HYROX time focused on an event that doesn't you don't really do any strength, then yeah, it's going to hurt you because even though they might seem like similar because they're running and station, like they're very different. Like you don't need a huge like strength base for Deka. Um, so if you, I think that was not great for me personally because I don't have the strength base of a lot of the other athletes um, in HYROX. So I don't remember who I was talking to. But you did the thing that was like with testing people's like ask people their thing,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
their
yeah.
times and whatever. And so maybe it was you I talked about like Miriam, I guess back squat. I don't know, 195 kilos, like 69 times or something like that. Or somebody told
Uh,
me this. Maybe
I
it
think
was not.
it's off the top of my head. I think it's 69 reps with 85 kilograms. She's done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 80 kilograms is like my 5 rep max. And that's hard. Like, so I'm so far behind, like with the strength that I really can't afford to be taking like long periods of time without focusing on strength. It'd be like if, Miriam never did any running. Like, so she's already good at the stations. So it's like you need to start like working on the things that, and I pick her a lot because she's like the polar opposite of me. Like she crushes the stations but you see that she's working a lot more on her runs, at least from like social media and stuff. So she's doing the stuff that she's has deficit in. So by training for Deka, I'm not working on the things I have deficits in for HYROX. So yeah, for me, not a great off season choice. If I was trying to get solely ready for that, but um, I don't know. I just feel like I'm not as excited about HYROX as I am about Deka, and it may just be because I think that it suits me better. Like I race better, not just because I've won, but just because the difference almost seems insurmountable for me to like gain the amount of strength that I need to be at the level of the top athletes right now. Like you don't go from squatting. Like I worked hard to get my 5 rep max to Miriam's like 70 rep max. So you don't gain that kind of strength in one cycle or 2 cycles or 3. Like it's like a long term kind of like goal to get to the level of strength, and they're still moving forward. So it's like for every 2 steps I'm taking, they're 30 steps ahead, and they're still also taking steps. So they're getting stronger, I'm getting stronger, but I'm just really far behind. So maybe it's that a little bit where I'm like, it just seems like I'm so far behind on those kind of things that it's like almost a little bit discouraging. So I typically revert to things that feel more comfortable, and Deka feels like more like, oh, okay, this is something I'm good at. I like training for it. Like I'm already kind of at the level where I'm really competitive. But I think you find that with a lot of athletes in any kind of sport, except this one, people are like, "Oh, I got to do everything." Like you don't have somebody who races the mile and also races the marathon because they're pretty good at both of them. No, they usually pick one and they focus and they get really good at one of them. So I think that like part of my like if I finally decide to specialize in just one, like it would be a tremendous advantage for me because a focused athlete in my mind is always going to be better than someone who's trying to be good at all things. So and then you have Chris that wins world championships, which completely discredits all of what I'm saying. Now, when you have like a lot of athletes that are focused in on one sport, you're not going to have that anymore. Like you won't have somebody who's going to be good at everything and just happens to be good at this too. So these specialized athletes are like the superhuman athletes who are also training specifically for it. So it'd be like, I don't know, somebody just who's a recreational runner goes out, well, not recreational, but like someone who's a good athlete, they just go out and they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to run the steeplechase with these Olympic people. Like they're a good athlete, but they're not specialized in that sport. So it's going to get to a point where, specializing in my mind is going to be creating the best athletes in each sport.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay. If we talk about your training a bit, so you're working with new coaches relatively recently, is that right?
so I've always had my running coach. So I've worked with him for like 4 or 5 years. He's like, we have like 4 girls who went to the Olympic, 5 girls that have went to the Olympic trials. Like he's a great running coach. I'm trying to get him to hybrid, but he doesn't believe me that he would be amazing. He's like a 15 low guy, but he's also like 6'2" and 180 pounds, or I don't know, 85 kilos, 80 kilos, something like that. Just like the Sebastian Conrad guy.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if the guy can learn to station, he's gonna be a problem.
If if he um if he focuses on it, like going back to the whole focus thing, I came away from our call with him not convinced that he was going to focus on it. So we'll see. We'll see. He might
Well,
pop up in Stockholm. I wouldn't be surprised in a week or
yeah,
so. So yeah.
if he's not gonna focus on it, then he's against a bunch of people that are. But genetically, like that guy could be a monster. Like
Yeah.
I think he could beat Hunter. Like I think genetically he has the speed. Like his marathon pace is faster than any of these guys are running within the race. So
Mm-hmm.
he just doesn't he isn't able to put it together because he's never done it before. But from a body standpoint, I feel like if he did focus on it, he would be just unmatched. But you
Yeah.
never know. And he does it. So, but I mean, 62 is pretty solid for first race and basically having like a 6 or 7 minute wall ball.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and he coped with the sleds very well as well. If he felt if anything might catch him out, it might be the sleds, and he like breezed through those. So it was just the more whatever technical stuff like the burpees and the wall balls that he fell down a bit. So yeah,
where was the Frank? No, Hamburg.
uh,
I don't
no, it was
light sleds probably. That's why I hit him that hard. You get a somewhere where they're pushing like 150 sleds. I don't know.
it was
So,
Stuttgart, I think it was Stuttgart.
oh, okay. Germany's always mixed. You never know what
Yeah.
kind of sled there. Um. So, anyways, you were asking training.
Anyway,
So,
so you're working with new coaches. So you got your running coach, but you're also taking on strength coach, is it?
yeah. So I have a guy that's like was my physical therapist for. I was having like some issues with my IT band. That are all fixed now. So they have like a facility that's basically like a sports performance place. I don't know if you've seen it. Like they just opened a new wing, I guess, of it. So it looks like a D1 like college type of like facility. They do a velocity based training. So they have like cameras that like watch you like squat or deadlift or whatever. And so depending on what the goal of the session is, whether it's speed, accelerative power, tempo, like this thing like tells you like you're going too fast, you're going too slow. So like if you're like, oh, you're going too fast, then you need to add weight so that you stay within the parameters of like what you're trying to train for. Super neat.
Nice.
It's like if you're like I nerd out on this kind of stuff. So um it's a really neat training tool, and I'm interested to see like how it's going to help my strength, because a lot of the tempo work and speed training, a lot of the like elite level power lifters and strength athletes, they do use these kind of methods of training. So I think it can almost be more transferable, because my whole idea before was like, oh, I just need more raw strength. But I mean, really, the stations aren't that heavy.
Mhm.
So obviously, like having raw strength is good, but being able to move quickly with weight is also important. So we'll see how it transfers to like practical application for the sport. But I'm excited um, to see how it works.
Do you feel like you've done anything wrong in the past, training wise? Like if you look back at how you have been training for HYROX, and I'm not suggesting there is, because obviously you perform well, but do you look at it and think there's mistakes you've made?
Like I said, if I was like specifically training for HYROX, like I wouldn't have raced Deka. So in my mind, like the only mistakes that I'm and still currently making is trying to do two things that are incredibly different at the same time. For me, because I can't. It's not that kind of athlete I am. I'm not very versatile. I'm really good when I focus in on something and like, but I I can't be elite level at everything. Like some people, they have like a level of talent that's able to like keep them, especially in a niche sport like hybrid. Like talent only gets you so far, but when you're in a sport where the talent is not like super saturated, like it's easier to stay on top. Like you don't have to specialize because there's just not enough talent to like push you out of the way. Whereas if you were an elite level runner, like those runners aren't doing like weird stuff on the weekends and trying to dabble in rock climbing. They're very focused on their sport. So, but running is so saturated. You have, I don't know, the Olympic trials for the women last year was sub 2:45 marathon, and you had almost 500 women who all ran that fast. So 2:45, I guess, I would say is like sub elite, but you have also like competing in that top pack that are running sub 220, probably at least 20 to 30 women. So if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, there's hundreds of women like back behind you that are ready to take your spot. Here, you have super talented athletes like Michaela and Meg, who, I'm not saying at all that they don't work hard. They probably train more than anybody else in the sport, but their level of like athleticism is higher. Like I don't think anybody else in the rest of the women's field could break 17 for a 5K. Like I don't think the running level is there for the rest of the athletes. Maybe Lauren, um, but you have a if you have a good like natural ability, I could like with the way the field is saturated right now, I'm able to train like however I want and still stay in the top probably 15. But if I want to be at the top, I need to like start focusing on being there. And even then, I might not be able to run like a 102 under, because that's what it's going to take to be in the top three is a sub 102 on
Mhm.
a golf course. So I don't know if it's within my abilities, but it definitely isn't within my abilities if I'm not focused on it.
Mhm. Okay.
But if you watch Michaela, like again, not saying she doesn't train hard, but she does a lot of different stuff, like that is not specific to HYROX at all. So, she's spending all this time like doing fitness, but like it's not like specifically towards exactly HYROX. Like she does a lot of CrossFit, and there's crossover for sure. But I think, if you're getting ready for a race, you would think it'd be more like specific to the sport that you're going to do. But what do I know? She's kicking my butt. So clearly she's whatever she's doing is working for her.
I did hear the other. I can't remember who said it, to be honest, because I've not spoken to her. But she she's told someone that she is going to be more focused on HYROX now,
Okay.
training wise. I don't think I'm imagining that. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see because yeah, at the moment her training looks like it is all over the place and some CrossFit focus and everything like that. But yeah,
Well, you find
um,
something that you can be, and I think that's a big reason why like Hunter's coming back. It's hard to give up being the best at something. Like when you find something that you can be the best at, like Michaela clearly sees that, she has the potential to win a world championship. Like, and then if you do, it's like it's hard to like let that go. Like Hunter found that he does all these other sports, but he always comes back to like this fitness because he is like made for the sport. Like his body, the way like he's able to have speed, like he's just made for hybrid athletics. And I think though he wants to do all these other things, he's not going to win them because he's just not like it's not that easy to go outside of a niche sport and win other niche sports because they're completely different. Or even not, I wouldn't even consider rowing niche. Like rowing is a sport that people dedicate, you know, their lives to. I mean, they have it in collegiate programs, like all the way up through adult. And these people are like serious athletes. They're not just like some schmo that's like in a boat. So to qualify for the Olympics, like a sport that's in the Olympics, like there's a lot of competition. So like we talked about the saturation of the sport, it's not that Hunter isn't an athlete, but this sport is so saturated that if you're not like on your game and focused on rowing or cycling or Ironman, because I know he did an Ironman, and his time was not bad. I think he did like under 11 hours.
mhm.
But the top guys, the pro guys, or even people in his age group are doing probably nine mid, and then the pros are doing like 8, sub 8. So the difference in level of competition, as you get into a sport that's bigger, it's hard to compete unless you're like focused in on that sport.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay. Um, we talked a bit about like obviously your 10K time, your training volume. People like to know these numbers when I talk to an elite. So, what about your strength? Where are you at in squats and deadlifts, for example?
So like for one,
One or
or
three or whatever you know, really.
um, I would say my one. I don't really one rep max, but I'd say my one rep max is probably somewhere around 205, 90 kilograms ish. And
Okay.
then I did I did two deadlifts for two the other week at like 315. So,
Okay.
but yeah, I mean, not like overly impressive. And that's the hex bar deadlifts, not straight bars. So, not overly like impressive like numbers. But again, like I said, the sport is not like, the stuff is not too heavy. So, it's like a balance between like, strength, but it's still muscular endurance. I mean, you're lunging probably at least 80 to 90 times over 100 meters. Um, but the stronger you are, the lighter potentially it's going to feel.
Yeah.
Potentially, might
What
still
do you
feel
feel
heavy.
is what do you feel is the most uh important indicator? Let's say I asked you your squat numbers, your deadlift numbers. Which out of those is most important, or not important, or like irrelevant towards HYROX?
See, I don't know because I mean, you can have someone that's really strong, but they don't have aerobic capacity. So, I mean, you'll see that a lot in like some of the CrossFit athletes who have tried HYROX and like they're not good. Like it takes them an
Mm-hmm.
hour and a half to like finish a HYROX because their aerobic capacity, it's still a very long event for them. Most events in CrossFit are what, less than 15 minutes. So, this is a long event. There was like a post, Ian, somebody, Did you see the CrossFit Games athlete that's trying HYROX now? I can't remember his last name, but Ian something. He's an American athlete, but I don't know what he ran for HYROX. But they're making a big deal about him, so maybe he's like. I mean, if they're making a big deal about him, he has to be sub 65.
Okay.
Otherwise, cares. But I mean, and even now, like unless you're running like a sub 63 for a man, like I wouldn't even know who you are. Maybe even like, and I follow the sport. I'm
Hmm.
also just a big fan. Like for Manchester, I'll stay Saturday just to watch. Like it's really, I wish they split the men's and women's races up. I think they're going to do an hour split for the elite in Manchester, but still, you get to maybe watch like three or four. Well, maybe you get to watch more than five men finish, but like you're warming up. So I want to be able to like also spectate, and then because it's fun to watch. Like I know there's like been talk about like, oh, but they're on the rower so long, they need to like have some kind of like system where you can see where everybody is or like judges counting. I was like, I think it's exciting. They get on that rower and you don't know anything. So you're just like sitting there waiting and you're like, who's gonna get off the rower? And then like so I don't know. I think it's fun to watch. But I talked to the obstacle race media guy, Matt. Like I think Deka is way more fun to watch because so fast.
Yeah.
So like they rower a minute and a half, they're off the rower, and then they're running, and then like so. From a spectator, like if you're not a fan of the sport, I think it's easier. It's an easier watch. Plus, it's half the time. But I mean, I think HYROX is pretty exciting to watch. Maybe it's because I'm from a running background, so I'm used to just watching people like run around. So I feel like HYROX is super exciting.
I think it's big. I thought the Maastricht in Chicago were a good watch actually. I
Yeah,
think they could do better with the wall balls, like just knowing where people are at on the wall balls, so we can see how close people
counters. Do you
are.
remember they counters? I don't know why
Yeah,
they got rid of them. I guess sometimes they didn't work. Um, but
I
I think
guess
that
they didn't work, but also like what they do actually do with the high rocks, like technically, like what they achieve is pretty amazing. So I'm pretty sure they can get them wall ball things to work.
well, because it was also too, it wasn't like it hit the target and it counted a rep. Like I think they had a button that they
Yeah.
push to count the reps. So it shouldn't be that hard to whatever. If they could just get the standardizations good, then that would be also. I think HYROX they're getting better, but I mean you'll still see some like meh stuff going on. Because I watch a lot of the live feeds, and I'm like, well, but if a judge says it's fine, then the athlete isn't really led to believe otherwise, so they're just going to keep you know doing it. Um,
You mean
like
movement standard wise, yeah?
yes, so like with the
Right.
wall ball, the counter, um, I'd say it's getting better. You don't see any like heinous stuff,
Mhm.
but if athletes are doing wall balls and the judge says it's good, they're not just going to go lower just for shits and giggles. Like, so they'll find a depth. And I've heard on like live feeds where it's like, oh, they found a depth that the judge will accept. And what does that even mean? Like, so I mean, I think wall balls are just a nightmare to judge because, you know, parallel, slightly below, it's fuzzy. So I think that, the standard is hard. Really, that's the only one I have issues with. I think the other ones are pretty cut and dry. There's just bad judging. Like I could see where a judge you could say, I think that's good and I think that's not good with the wall balls, but the other stuff I think are just judging errors.
Burpees is a little grey, right? Forearm length or a foot length, actually, it is.
I think it should be like directly in front of your feet. Yeah, a forearm length is kind of arbitrary. Like I don't like the rule personally.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, okay, that one too. We can fix that one as well. Because how do you know like they do a bad one or whatever and you take them back? How do you know where 5 meters is? Or is it 10 meters?
I'm not sure what it is for burpees.
I thought it was five.
I think it's
So,
5. I think it's 5. We got sent back in Manchester, actually. It was 5 meters, yeah. It wasn't me. It was my doubles partner.
Uh, yeah, I just don't like the burpee broad jumps in general. Because yeah, again, I take that back. The burpees are a nightmare for judging too because they're like moving and I don't know, forearms hard to judge. And I think maybe it was, I don't know, somebody asked about like staggered feet when you come forward, which isn't like not in the rules, but then they got like penalized for the stagger feet. I don't know. So they just need to pick some rules, and that's why I like the PFT because they have the line, but then you would have to count,
Yeah.
which would also be nightmare. Um, so I don't know what the answer is to that, but I think they're making like positive strides towards like better standardization. I still think they should let you use the bucket.
For for
All
the wall
talk.
balls.
Yeah. If everybody squat to the bucket, then there would be no question.
I also made you use the bucket.
Yeah.
Mm.
I like the bucket personally. Nobody else agrees with me.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
But yeah, you're not sold either. I'm team
That
bucket, but they won't let it anymore, so it's kind of gone. But I mean, then you won't see anybody half squatting, which is more annoying to see than no bucket.
true.
Push press balls.
True.
Just make the bucket lower. Like it's almost a penalty to have to use the bucket. Like they make it like 12 inches off the ground. So they're like, you either get to this bucket or then you got to do your wall balls right. So I don't know, maybe some kind of penalty. But I know, I don't know. They could get rid of the wall balls for all I care. I don't like the wall balls anyways.
Get rid of wall
They're
balls, get rid of burpees. It's a
get rid of
running
wall
event.
balls, and if we could just like sub in like the assault bike and some other type of cardio machine, that would be. I've actually talked. We have like a group chat with the Americans about how we could fix the race, and my solution is we only have machines, so we just do all the stations are machines, and then you don't have to count or anything. So, but
Yeah.
I don't think people like that idea.
No. No, I
And
don't.
it would watch.
um what do you do? You mentioned like you chat with the Americans. Um like it's grown HYROX has grown a lot better in the UK than in America, seemingly at the moment anyway. Do you feel like there's any particular reason for that? Like would you do anything differently in HYROX or in America to help it grow more?
So I'm actually an ambassador for HYROX. So I've talked to them before about I think it'd be a good direction to move towards like a half rocks, something shorter, something easier. Because I don't think HYROX is actually accessible. Like they say it's for everybody, but I don't think it's accessible to everybody. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? How hard, even if you run open, that like a normal person who runs open, who's fit, like you don't see any not fit people at HYROX. You go to HYROX, everybody's got like six packs. I'm like, I'd got to keep my shirt on because everybody looks super ripped out there. So it's like a CrossFit competition. So I feel like they need like a lower level because even the open is still 5 miles of running, which is a big threshold. Like 5 miles is a lot of running for people who don't run.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if they had an event that was maybe like half of the running, half rocks, that it'd be more like alluring for people to try because I think it's like very intimidating. Because I think if you were so a normal person that just works out, that's why Deka Fit is really good. Because so if you're a normal person who works out, the Deka Fit, even if you're really, really slow, it might take you an hour and a half. If you're really, really slow, that open race, I bet you could take you 3 hours,
Mm-hmm.
two and a half. So you're thinking about like I would compare that to somebody like doing a marathon. You can't do a marathon with no training. Like you can, but like it's gonna take you a really long time. So I think having something more accessible to like lower levels would be good for the sport. Plus, you don't even have to market it as like Deca Mile isn't marketed as like this is for your beginners, and this is like it could just be a whole different event, like a speed event, or I think it would also attract more CrossFit athletes who don't want to run 5 miles. 2 miles, they'd be like, oh, okay, maybe I could run 2 miles, but 5 miles for like somebody who doesn't run, like I said, that's a lot. So I think if you could get more like CrossFit athletes into the sport, that would be like a good target market as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think I think the doubles they could at least have a doubles event where you split it half and half, like you
Yeah,
each do it, 4 legs each.
a runner athlete. Oh, so you have okay, so you would alternate stations.
Yeah, I think that would attract across the CrossFit community quite well. Like they could get their head around 4K running four stations.
Yeah, but then you have to have a friend. Some people don't have friends. What if they just want to go and do it by themselves? They need an option that doesn't involve so much running.
That's true. That's true.
That's weird. Like they introduced the relay, so I like the style of the relay, but then you have to have 3 friends. Have 3 friends. So I think if they shortened the run, that it would attract a lot more like strength style athletes that don't want to run as much, or like a HYROX no running.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I think you have to really cut the cardio out if you want to attract more like of that kind of. I mean, there's I don't know how many CrossFits there are across the country, but there has to be like I don't know hundreds of thousands of people who do CrossFit in America. So I mean, you're missing a big chunk, I think, of a market that you could really capitalize on. But they're doing good. They're going into like they have their affiliate program, and I think the PFT like is really accessible to most people. It's still a high rep kind of thing, but at least if you're like not somebody who's a crazy athlete, and maybe it takes you 45 to 50 minutes. So that's still kind of in an acceptable range in my mind. Like when people start doing events that take longer than an hour, it's hard for them to like kind of wrap their head around that. Because, normally you work out for an hour.
Hmm.
So if you normally work out for an hour and now you're thinking about, oh shit, I got to do this workout or I got to do this event that's 2.5 hours long. I think for a lot of people, it's very intimidating because it's something they've never done before. But if you can keep the work time to around an hour or less, like I think you'll be able to attract more people.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I
I,
agree. I mean, it is hard, and like away from just like the running and attracting the non-runners, there's elements like Flo and I from HYROX Daily put up that post earlier about the sandbag lunges, and should you be able to put that down, and some people would just struggle to do that and keep the sandbag on their shoulders, for
well,
100 meters.
on your, well, you posted it, I thought.
Yeah, it's a collaborative post. So, I posted it, and then HYROX Daily sort of got added into it, basically.
Okay, because somebody was like, I think that you should be able to drop the sandbag as long as like you're not throwing it or like getting in the way. Like step to the side, you can put your sandbag down, and then you can continue later. So the guy was like, well, it's an advantage. It's an advantage to set it down. I was like, how many people who are going to win are going to set their sandbag down?
Yeah.
Nobody. Like, so if your goal is to win, don't set the sandbag down. And if your goal is to just finish and complete the event, set it down. Take your time. Like, do whatever you need to get to the finish line. But yeah, the whole idea of DQing somebody for sitting it down seems like I don't like that rule unless you're throwing it or like making forward progress while it's not on your shoulders. But I think there was also a rule like it says in the rules that you're supposed to have it over both shoulders. I see people all the time on one shoulder,
Hmm.
so they're not even enforcing like the rule the way it's supposed to be enforced. So like, why can't you set it down? Why can't
Yes.
you hold front? Like so I think that it's an unnecessary rule that is another barrier for people. Like I feel like you maybe it was in your post or somebody said it when I was reading it, but like they were worried that they can't finish the lunges without setting it down and they don't want to get DQ'd. Plus you're like super far into the race at that point.
Hmm.
So I think any kind of barriers that you can take down without like ruining the integrity of the race, then that's good. Like, so setting the sandbag down doesn't change the race at all. Like, if anything, you have to pick it back up, you have to re-rack it, and you wasted a bunch of time. But if it like creates like more accessibility to more athletes, I think it's a good rule change.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And this guy had pointed it out to me. He ended up taking, I think it was over 11 minutes on the lunges. And
Mm-hmm.
like 11 minutes with that weight on your back is a long time, isn't it? So it like just,
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, he would definitely be able to rest better,
mm,
um, and have it on his shoulders. But again, if you're taking 11 minutes on the lunges, like you're not competing to win your age. Like you're not, like I don't know why people are so upset about it,
no,
because
no.
they're not like, and even if it does create an advantage, like, so say you think it's more advantageous for you to set it down and you do win your age group, like everybody has the same opportunity to set the bag down. So as long as you're still falling within the rules, like I don't see that would change the race in a way that creates unfairness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Um, you mentioned a minute ago about uh you get to a HYROX and it looks like everyone's got a six pack and so on. And I know you've spoken in the past about like body image and something that maybe you've struggled with when you were in running. Um, can you talk about that a little bit more and how you feel about it now in the hybrid space?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, I mean, kind of a joke, but kind of not a joke. People are really ripped there. But it's hard to like envision, like they talk a lot about it in like in regards to like race, but sport too. Like, you know, it's hard to see like when you have, especially in America, like people of color or people or women in positions of power, if there aren't positions, people that look like you there. So it's hard to, for women growing up, like imagine being president, because we've never had a female president. So it's hard to like imagine what that would look like. So when you're in sport and you have like this idea of like, oh, I don't look like any of these athletes. Like I could never be good at this sport because I don't look like any of them. So you have to look a certain way to be part or to be good or to be part of the sport. Because even I think it's hard for people, even if you're not trying to compete at the top level, like people have this idea in their mind, like, oh, I can't run because I'm not built like a runner, or I don't have a runner's body, or I can't dance because I don't have a dancer's body. So I think again we talk about these barriers, whether they're created by a race or created by yourself, that you don't let yourself experience things because you have this idea in your mind that you can't do it. So I think by having, a sport that embraces, all kinds of different body types, whether they're muscular or ripped or whatever. And you have people who are thin, and they're all like competing, they're all doing the sport. So I mean, I could see I'm a personal trainer, so I could see taking one of my clients. Actually, my roommate went to Madrid with me, so she's a marathon runner, and she does this stuff, and she's like, I could never do this. This looks awful. But and she's like, I just can't do this kind of stuff. And I was like, well, you could, you just, you do it slower. So I think she sees all these people that are super fit and super ripped and whatever. And she's like, well, I can't be like them. So I don't know. I mean, it's in your head, but at the same time, like your mind is very powerful. So like growing up as a runner, like all the people I saw that were top level athletes, because I wanted to compete, they didn't look like I looked. I was just always kind of like a bigger runner. I had coaches through college and high school that were like, oh, well, if you could just lose 5 pounds, or if you could just lose 10 pounds. Like I look back at pictures, I was like, I was really fucking skinny. Like I was not overweight at all. But like this whole idea that being lighter is faster is so ingrained in the running community that like it's hard to like push that aside. So I think a lot of athletes, I mean, a lot of my friends that are in the running community, more of them have had eating disorders than haven't, because it's just so entwined in like the culture that you have to, the skinnier you are, the faster you run. So I think that we can break down some of like these ideas with sports like HYROX, because you see all these different people on the starting line and none of them look the same. So I think it's easier, even if you don't see someone who looks exactly like you, it doesn't appear that there's like a certain type of person that can do these events. So I think it makes it easier to conceptualize yourself doing stuff like that if it doesn't appear that one type of person is the type of person that does them.
Mm-hmm.
That, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm I do nutrition calls with people like preparing for HYROX, and I'm speaking to a lot of people who are tired at the moment. Um, Partly because like they're just training so much, but I think they're coming from that mindset of they need to be light. They're under fueled, like they're not eating anywhere near enough carbs. I think they're getting a lot of nutrition advice from the bodybuilding community or the weight loss community, as opposed to like performing for HYROX community.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm certainly sort of seeing that carry. I know you posted something similar on your Instagram, I think the other week, wasn't it, about under fueling and under fueling at the right times and making sure you're fueled during the season and so on.
Yeah. I mean, it's way more, in my mind, it's more detrimental to your performance to be underfueled than overfueled. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're a little overfueled, I mean, it's not, you're probably going to burn it up anyways, like through exercise. So being a little overfueled, I'd rather be that than under. But I think, there are going to be situations where maybe losing weight would be beneficial to your performance. Like I have a client that runs marathons and he's probably like 40 pounds overweight. But, for me, and it may be even be more uncomfortable for me to breach that subject because of my like own experiences. Like I don't want to develop a disordered eating pattern, but like there are also detriments to being overweight as an athlete. Like, you put extra strain on your joints, and it's just harder on your body. But most athletes you probably work with aren't overweight. They're just,
Mm-hmm.
they aren't eating enough to support like the amount of exercise that they're doing. So I think that people just need to feel feel themselves like based on their performance, not like, because I don't really do anything specific now. I'll track every now and then just to make sure really that I'm eating enough. Because like you said, I don't really get enough carbs. So I, like sometimes I'll be like, oh, I need to track my calories, make sure I'm eating enough, and I'm almost always eating enough now. It's just it's easier to get calories from fat. So for the
Mm-hmm.
amount of food that I need to eat, it's kind of hard to get that amount of volume if you eat a low fat diet, or not that I would eat a low fat diet, but it's easier to get my calories in if a lot of them are coming from fat, because then you need like less food volume. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think it's a huge problem in the athlete community with just underfueling, and then you're tired, and then you blame that fatigue on the training. But really, maybe your body could handle the training if it was fueled properly.
Yeah.
Uh, and then a lot of people, it leads them to injury from chronic underfueling, because when you don't eat enough, then it's not just pulling from your fat, it's pulling from your bones, and your body's not able to appropriately recover the way it should. People get stress fractures, all kinds of different injuries from something that in my mind doesn't even have to happen, if you're kind of aware of what you're putting in and what you're expending.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, we've been talking for over an hour. I
Oh,
really
really?
appreciate it. Yeah, yeah. I've got a couple more questions, if that's all right. Um, One is you posted a few weeks ago on Instagram. You said, find something in your life that makes you excited to wake up in the morning, set goals that scare you, and believe in yourself. So, what's the goal that you've got that scares you?
High rock. High rock. I mean, really scares me because I'm just like, I think it pushes me out of like, that is one thing I do like about it. Like, it pushes me out of my comfort zone. I mean, I am realistic, but I don't have it not in my mind to win Manchester. Like, it's a goal. It's an A goal. It's a big goal. But I don't train this hard to train for fourth. So I know that I need I need my magic race to happen. But I think if it could, I mean, and some people don't have a magic race, the stars align, it could happen. So that's all. I mean, that's my reach goal, my scary goal, so I think verbalizing stuff like that is also helpful, because it's like, oh, that's a big goal. um but yeah. So, but I don't, like we talked about the passion and the fire. I don't know that my fire is as lit like as it was before Deka, because I don't think I do 100% believe in
Mhm.
the goal. Like, I'm like, it's a goal, but I run the numbers. I do too much with the numbers, and I'm like, it's a goal. I need this. Like, I need all this to happen. So it seems like it's a really far reach. Whereas, like, when Deca, I was like, well, you know, there's this, and this person, and we're all real close, and I need to just have a good day, and it could happen. But in my mind, in the scenario that I'm creating for world championships, I'm like, not only do I need to have a flawless day, I need other people to not have such a flawless day, which could happen. I mean, it's a long event. Like, it's still very strategic. Like, I think that strategy wise, like, nobody's going to out strategize me. So I'll figure this out. I'll figure out my perfect strategy by then. But we'll see.
And you mentioned Chris earlier. If Chris had sat down and run the numbers before Vegas, would she have truly believed she could win it?
No,
Probably not, right? No. So
Chris doesn't run the numbers. She out there, and she runs, and she has a lot of grit and fire, and like, I think Chris, she has the mindset of like a champion. She doesn't ever count herself out, which is good. And I think that's what makes people great. I mean, you see that on the men's side, everybody thinks that they're the winner over there. So, a lot of, I think the women's side is a lot more humble. Like, so you don't see the people that are like, oh, I'm the best in the world, or I'm the best. Like, all the men are just like, huh, like chest bumping and stuff. But the women are like, they're like silent killers. So,
yeah.
but they don't have to tell everybody that they're the best, because we know, we see. Well, we don't see, because you're like a station in front of us while we're all still running. But so I don't know. It's just interesting, like the different dynamics between the men's and the women's field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Um, Before we finish, anything you wish I'd asked?
Uh, I don't think so.
Okay.
You didn't ask a question, so I'm on the spot now. I don't think so.
All right. Where should people go to follow you, find out more about you, find out about your coaching?
Terra Nova Trainer on Instagram, on the gram.
That's it.
Yeah.
All right. Brilliant. Well, thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate it. Good luck for the rest of the season. Good luck for Miami, Manchester.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Take care. Talk to you soon, everyone.
Yep. See ya.
See ya.
Thanks.